Welcome back to You're All Doomed, the podcast that's been slicing and dicing its way through Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, 13 nautical miles at a time. I'm your co-host, Brian.
And I'm Coast Guard Greg. And this chunk begins with Jason wielding his makeshift weapon and ends with a very perturbed-looking Sean at a computer terminal. Beep, boop, 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 beep, boop. With that piece of sharpened glass in his hand, Jason slams his arm down. We hear Tamara scream, but it immediately cuts to the horn of the ship blowing. We don't really know for certain what happened to her, and it's not very scary or anything, but I do like that cute little transition. That's cute. Up in the wheelhouse, the Admiral and the Chief Petty Officer are attempting to navigate in this now raging storm, and they're lamenting about fatherhood. We get a quick insert shot of Jason pulling an antique harpoon off the wall. But we learn that the Chief Petty Officer, Jim Carlson, has a 19-month-old son. So he basically should have just announced that he's one day from retirement. He takes the helm so the Admiral can leave to go take a dump or something. And then we get a pretty cool shot from outside looking into the wheelhouse, and we see Jason creep up behind Carlson and then shove the harpoon into his butt. He plunges it in and out a few times, and I swear I think it's going inside the guy's butt.
Aside from the fact that it does look like he's getting stuck in the butt, I actually like this shot because you're seeing it from outside of the bridge. It's pouring rain outside, and so we're just hearing the noise of the storm, but we're looking through the window of the bridge, and it's kind of, lit in like red and green light. And, we see Jason sneaking up behind Officer Carlson. He doesn't obviously see Jason coming, and just to see it all happen from like a third person point of view is kind of nice.
Yeah, I liked that. I thought it was neat. It's so weird that they made it look like he's getting stabbed in his butthole.
Right.
Jim Carlson was played by Fred Henderson, who was in Shoot to Kill as Agent Owenby, another person on 21 Jump Street, a couple of episodes of The X-Files, and an episode of The Sentinel, which we will discuss in future seasons. On the big screen, he was in Final Destination 2. He's still working and has a ton of voice and acting credits, up to and including some of the DC Comics shows like Arrow and The Flash. And then the Admiral, having voided his bowels, comes back and finds Carlson's body. Sadly, the harpoon is in the guy's back, not his butt. But he's definitely dead.
As Admiral Robertson is examining the body, Jason comes up from behind and in this like really super lame slow motion slices his neck from behind. There's a few things I don't like about this. One is the slow motion that I mentioned. You can tell that it wasn't really shot at a high frame rate where it would look smooth and impressive as slow motion. It just looks like it's the original footage, and then they just slowed it down. So it's really kind of like choppy and just, it's not a great effect.
Almost like strobe or something. Yeah, it's weird.
But then the other problem I have is I don't understand where Jason came from, because based on where he appears, Admiral Robinson would have had to walk right past Jason just to get to Carlson's body. So there's no way that he would have not seen Jason.
Yeah, unless like the stairs on either side of the wheelhouse make like a donut and Jason could go around as the Admiral was coming up.
Oh, that could be. Yeah.
But you're right. It's weird. I thought that the throat slit effect was pretty good, but I agree with you that the slow motion kind of took a lot of sting out of it. And they also weirdly cut away for a few seconds. And I noticed that Jason used the wrong edge of the knife again, like he did in part 2. But I wondered almost if that's like an antique whaling knife or something that's shaped differently. The Admiral was played by Warren Munson, who was in a movie that I watched a lot as a kid called Devil Dog, The Hound of Hell. He was on, basically name an 80s show, and he was on it. Growing Pains, Falcon Crest, Airwolf. And he played admirals again on Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Voyager. He's been quiet since 2005, so I'd imagine he's retired from acting.
As far as the character of Admiral Robertson is concerned, he's wearing the proper uniform of an admiral. He has a Surface Warfare Officer insignia, or an SWO pin. This is the first milestone qualification that an eligible commissioned officer may receive in surface warfare. His medals are mostly unimpressive for an SWO of his rank, And the medal suggests that his career was primarily consisted of being present without any deserving service in command or administration. So basically, they're just participation trophies.
Goddamn millennials. Sean and Rennie are actually on their way up to the wheelhouse with the intention of radioing for a Coast Guard cutter to come and evacuate Rennie. I'd be surprised if the Coast Guard would agree to do that for one passenger, but maybe they would. And sadly, they find that the Admiral has been posed at the controls of the ship. I mean, he's dead, but he's been like propped up and kind of tied to the wheel, which is... We know Jason has staged his victims before, but this seems more theatrical than he ever has done previously, almost like he's trying to make a haunted house or something.
Yeah, a lot of the bodies that he's posed in the past have been more to shock people that are going to stumble upon them. But in this case, it just seems like Admiral Robertson just had, a heart attack or even just ate something bad for lunch and he's, hunched over the wheel. It's not, so the actual reveal that he's dead is just more kind of like, oh shit, he's dead. But the posing itself was not really, didn't have a whole lot of purpose to it. Like
he'd tried some of Crazy Nautical Ralph's clams and it killed him. Setting aside his grief, Sean gets on the intercom to declare an emergency to the rest of the ship. So we get several shots of random people emerging from their staterooms to listen to the announcement. One guy behind Julius looks exactly like Bobcat Goldthwait's brother from One Crazy Summer.
Fortunately, only a fraction of the passengers that we saw earlier in the movie make their way to the bridge, which makes me wonder, did Sean expect all those people that we saw earlier to show up there? Because that bridge is not very big. And if he's expecting potentially dozens of people to show up, where were they supposed to go?
Yeah, it would get pretty crowded in there quickly. Although, like we've said, we don't see a ton of people all at once, so we really still have no idea how many people are on this trip. But yeah, more than like probably 5 or 6 people, and it's going to get pretty stinky in there.
Once this handful of passengers does show up on the bridge, they immediately know something's wrong because they see the bodies of Admiral Robertson and Carlson on the floor.
So now they know shit's going wrong.
Right. We also hear Sean making a mayday call, which is picked up by the Coast Guard cutter Dallas. It's a real ship. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Dallas was commissioned in 1967. She's one of 12 Hamilton-class cutters built for the Coast Guard. She received the Coast Guard's Meritus Unit Commendation for serving as the on-scene command for the search and rescue operation following the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986.
Wow.
And she was decommissioned on March 30th, 2012.
A worthy ship.
But before Sean can tell the Coast Guard the nature of his problem, Jason shows his maritime knowledge once again by ripping out the communication cables.
Of all the people that are in the wheelhouse, I found it surprising that Charles takes a moment to console Sean about his dead father. That was a surprisingly human moment for that character.
For once.
Then the always helpful Crazy Nautical Ralph arrives to remind everyone that they're all going to die. And he seems to know an awful lot about Jason Voorhees and how he came down the river and got on board. This makes Charles begin to suspect that the deckhand is actually behind all of this, but not everybody agrees with him.
Yeah, Crazy Nautical Ralph says, "You're all going to die. You're the last ones. He's come back for you." Which made me wonder, the last ones of what? There was a point, and I don't remember if it was in just some background information I read or if it was actually mentioned in the movie, but it was implied that Lakeview High School was going to close after this senior class graduated. But it's not like Jason has a vendetta against the people that are in this high school. So why are they the last ones?
Or access to the PTO minutes where they decided that this would be the last graduating class.
Right.
Julius takes charge and puts together a posse of randos to go find this motherfucker. Charles tries to reestablish some authority, but school's out, McCullough.
I love Julius's red, white, and blue tracksuit.
We don't know where Rennie is for all of this. Apparently she's off dropping the anchors. I don't know if that's a euphemism or if it's actually some function that she plans to, fulfill on the ship.
Well, I also love that apparently she's the one that has the most intimate knowledge of the ship's anatomy and not the captain's son.
Yeah, good point. How would she even know where the anchor is?
She knew exactly where to go and exactly what to do in order to drop the anchors. And then Charles actually shows up and knows exactly how to stop the anchors from dropping.
So everybody but Sean knows how to operate this vessel.
Pretty much.
While all of this is going on, Ava is wandering around looking for her friend Tamara, winds up in Tamara's stateroom and finds a slimy hole in the bathroom door, goes inside and then finds Tamara's body, staring blindly at a shard of mirror, which was a cute little allusion to her cocaine usage from earlier. But now we have confirmation that Tamara has been killed by Jason. She was played by Charlene Martin, also came from an episode of 21 Jump Street, and has no credits since a 2008 episode of Smallville. But her son is actor Alexander Ludwig, who has been in some pretty high-profile stuff like Hunger Games and Bad Boys for Life.
Upon seeing Tamara's bloodied body lying on the floor, Eva makes a run for it, and she ends up in that low-ceilinged disco that we mentioned before. It's actually kind of a cool setting. The music is blasting and the lights are flashing. So for one, it's a really nice contrast to the settings where we usually see Jason, but it's also very disorienting because of the loud music and the smoke and the flashing lights. And they're setting it up to be something pretty cool, but unfortunately it ends up being kind of stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I like how it's supposed to indicate that maybe she's still a little bit high from the toot earlier and is completely disoriented and spinning around and has no idea what direction she should run in next. But then we get this weird shot of Jason standing underneath the purser sign for some reason. It's set up almost as like it's a visual gag, but as far as I can tell, the purser is a person on a ship who's principally responsible for handling money on board. On modern merchant ships, the purser is the officer responsible for all administration, including ship's cargo and passenger manifests. Frequently, cooks and stewards answer to that person, and then the purser reports directly to the captain. So I'm not sure how that's meant to apply to Jason in any way. But then what follows is probably my least favorite kill of the entire series, because Jason grabs Ava with both hands on her neck and lifts her into the air and basically just strangles her, even though the fucking disco ball is right there. He could have smashed her head into it or something better than this.
It was such a wasted opportunity.
It really was. I mean, to be fair, apparently Kelly Hu did that stunt herself, so when Jason chucks her to the ground and she hits pretty hard, Kane Hodder was very complimentary of Kelly Hu's stunt work, how she didn't flinch or anything like that. But it's such a lame, boring kill for a Jason movie.
That's actually the only part of the kill that I like, is when Jason just tosses her aside across the dance floor like she's a rag doll. But yeah, everything leading up to it is it's just so kind of weak.
It just doesn't seem like Jason would strangle somebody. That's a very pedestrian method. But in any case, Ava was played by Kelly Hu. She started her career with 21 Jump Street, was on an episode of Night Court, Growing Pains, and appeared in the Oliver Stone The Doors movie, along with The Scorpion King several years later. Most notably, she played Lady Deathstrike in the second X-Men movie. But she's worked steadily and has a recurring role on Arrow, and actually voices the character Devora in Mortal Kombat. A little piece of trivia, she was the first Asian American crowned Miss Teen USA in 1985.
Kelly Hu is also the spokesperson in a Viagra commercial in 2015, which I'll post a link to on social media.
Julius and his posse have managed to gather up some stuff from the game room and all that. So they've got some axes, some fire axes, the skeet shooting rifles, and some pool cues. So they can begin their hunt for whoever is killing their shipmates. I thought for a second that Julius was going to go with nothing but his fists, but he wisely did choose to take one of the guns.
If you found yourself in the same situation where you had kind of like an arsenal to choose from to go face, this motherfucker, what would you grab?
That's a cool question. I don't know that I would choose a gun. Because I guess you could like fire it, and if you miss, then you could use the gun to smack the person. But I think I would go with an axe. I think. Yeah, the gun has distance, but you gotta hit them, and you got to reload and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I don't know. What about you? What would you pick?
Same thing. I would go with some sort of chopping weapon, even though it's close quarters combat. I just feel like there's too much margin of error with a gun. How do you know it's loaded? How do you necessarily know how to operate it if something goes wrong? And then you mentioned reloading and things like that. I just don't want to have to worry about that. I would much rather just hope to get a really good shot with an axe or a machete or some kind of like samurai sword. And
so you're Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction.
Right. And just, hope to get a good shot off, with a hit long enough that I can, run away and improvise my next move.
Well, unlike you and I, Wayne has chosen a gun, and he goes off on his own to see if he can find his friend JJ, the rocker, down in the engine room. But he insists on filming while he searches. So it's funny because we get a couple of shots of his point of view through the video cassette recorder, and it's kind of our first found footage style Friday the 13th movie, which is, something that we've talked about wanting.
I can't figure out why Wayne is suddenly concerned about JJ missing, because she disappeared at the very beginning. I think the ship had either just left dock or had not left the dock yet before she went down to the engine room. And we don't know how much real time has passed, but it's dark and there's a huge storm brewing. So it's probably been a few hours, but suddenly now Wayne's like, I need to go look for JJ. Where the hell is she? When it, was set up very early on that they were really good friends.
True, but he didn't know anything was necessarily wrong until now. So, he might have figured that she was just off, jamming for that long. I mean, I agree with you. It does seem a little implausible, but maybe as soon as he heard Sean's announcement over the PA, he's like, oh, shit, I haven't seen JJ for a couple hours. I better go make sure she's okay. In true Velma style, a burst of steam knocks off Wayne's glasses, so he blindly stumbles around and then shoots his gun when somebody jumps in front of him.
Somebody being the operative word.
Yeah, it turns out it's that hunky deckhand that was flirting with Tamara and Ava earlier, who we haven't seen since.
Were you really able to make that out, or was it just process of elimination? Because when I saw it, it's all, if I remember correctly, it's all through Wayne's video camera perspective. And I had no idea who it was. And so for a long time, I'm just like, okay, maybe we'll find out later. But then it wasn't until they got off the ship and I realized like, oh, they're really not going to tell you who it was, that I kind of put two and two together and just assumed it was that guy that Tamara and Eva were flirting with a while ago for 3 seconds.
I did pick up on it, but it was a moment of like, oh, that guy?
Right.
Like I'd completely forgotten he existed. So, yeah, it was not very well set up, to be sure. Wayne is now a murderer, essentially. And I find it creepy how he keeps filming. He's fascinated by the fact that he's now murdered this man. And in the frame of his shot, we see some feet appear over the head of the prone corpse. So Wayne pans up and finds that it's Jason, who is not pleased how the camera adds 10 pounds. He swats the camera out of Wayne's hand, and then there's a brief chase that ends when Wayne blindly trips on the bloody guitar and falls next to JJ's body.
Wayne doesn't have long to process what he's just seen before Jason comes up from behind Wayne and grabs him and throws him into a control panel, which causes him to be electrocuted and bursts into flames.
I liked that one. I thought that was pretty cool. The sparking effects were nice, and I kind of like how it ignites this fire. I thought that was a pretty good kill. Wayne was played by Martin Cummins, who came from 21 Jump Street, was in the Wes Craven movie Shocker, and was on... Oh, no, that's not true. I'm just saying that it's a shocker that he was on 21 Jump Street. I'd love it if you just left all this in. All right, take 3. Wayne was played by Martin Cummins, who was on an episode of 21 Jump Street, shocker, and was on the James Cameron Jessica Alba show Dark Angel at one point. He also appeared on Smallville, but he's got a role right now as Tom Keller on Riverdale.
We get a really quick shot back on the bridge where we see Charles telling everyone that Rennie has been locked safely in her room. But that's how this episode wraps up.
We lost 6 people this episode. Carlson, the Admiral, Tamara, Ava, the random hunk, and Wayne.
So to find out who discovers Wayne's video camera footage and turns it into the Friday the 13th movie I've always wanted to see, tune in next week. Until then, you're all doomed.